Tigers land another massive 2025 commitment, beating out 2 SEC rivals in the process. How did they do it? We're talking about it. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Words, they're important. As playoffs wind down, these sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thanks for being here with us today. And we got a ton to get into. Tigers had the day off on Thursday. It was a recovery day. Friday, they're back on the practice field, but no media availability. So I wanted to take the opportunity today to revisit something offensive coordinator Joe Sloan said. There's some major changes coming to college football. Helmet comms, where the coach can talk to the quarterback in his helmet. iPads on the sideline. Joe Sloan talked about LSU's contingency and plans for that. We're going to get to that here in a bit. And speaking of quarterbacks, Garrett Nussmeier was snubbed, y'all. I'm not one that throws a hissy fit about that a lot of times. I don't think it's a giant deal, but it's something we got to talk about. We're going to talk about it coming up here in just a little bit. So thank you for being here on the show. But the massive news as we push off from the dock, LSU lands 4-star defensive back CJ Jimcoily. Now, if you listen to the show, we've told you for a couple of weeks now, this was expected. And it came down to LSU and Stanford. But Tennessee and Alabama were also among the finalists. Ultimately, what this came down to was relationships. That's not my words. It's CJ Jimcoily's words, and you're going to hear that in just a quick second. But first, a little bit of a thumbnail on the prospect. So CJ Jimcoily is a safety. He's out of Lipscomb Academy in Nashville, Tennessee. He's a 4-star. He's the number 36 safety in the country in the composite. Rivals actually has him as the 20th best safety and number 189 overall. He is a 4-star, and he is big, y'all. He is 6'3", 210 pounds. Remember, this is a guy just entering his senior year, 6'3", 210, and Blake Baker plans to use him at that star position. Remember, the star is that hybrid linebacker safety, really a safety playing closer to the line of scrimmage, and he will certainly fit that role. That's where Major Burns is playing right now. Freshman Juwan Johnson is backing up Major Burns there, and Jimcoily looks to factor in there. Sometimes I often say, if you're familiar, I'm less concerned with the star ranking than I am with the offers because I don't care what your star ranking is, who's offered you a scholarship. Well, with CJ Jimcoily, I just told you, he had Tennessee, he had Alabama, Stanford, Oklahoma, Louisville, Auburn, Michigan, Penn State, Missouri, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Michigan State, Texas A&M, Miami, Georgia Tech, Nebraska, Florida, Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Purdue, Duke, Indiana. I could keep going on. Boston College, Cal, USF, UNLV, Memphis, Vandy, Troy, Western Kentucky, UAB. Some smaller schools there at the beginning, but the big guys got on him, and all the big guys got on him. And ultimately, LSU pulled away and landed CJ Jimcoily. There's a couple of reasons why I think this is significant. One, I just mentioned, which is the relational aspect of this. When CJ Jimcoily committed to LSU, he gave an interview to On3, the Bengal Tiger. And one of the things that's important to remember is Jimcoily's dad is from New Orleans. And remember, Frank Wilson is LSU's recruiting coordinator, and he and safeties coach Jake Olson were the lead recruiters here for CJ Jimcoily. And Frank Wilson, we've talked about so many times, is such an integral part to this LSU staff. He is effectively, I've referred to him as New Orleans high school royalty. The high school coaches in New Orleans are a fraternity, and they support one another. And Frank Wilson is one of them. And I love this quote from CJ Jimcoily. He told On3, quote, "When we talked to Coach Frank, that was the highlight for us for a lot of reasons. My dad went to O.P. Walker when Coach Frank was there as a coach. My grandmother still lives in New Orleans, so we have a lot of uncles and cousins there. The LSU visit, it was like being around home. And when we met with Coach Frank, that was one of my longest talks. He talked about his coaching history and people he's recruited, like Tyrann Mathieu. At one point, he had his phone out, turned it around, and it was Joe Burrow's dad, Jimmy Burrow. It was fun hearing a lot of the guys that played there when he was coaching. He really helped my parents feel comfortable with Coach Olson and Coach Frank. It's real relationships. Like Coach Frank said, they will take care of you when you go to LSU. How many times can you say Coach Frank in one answer? It just goes to show you how integral Frank Wilson is to what LSU is building, in particular in New Orleans. Remember, 4 commits already for the class of 2026. All of them are from New Orleans. All of them either primary or secondary recruiter, Frank Wilson. For LSU to continue dominating recruiting in the city of New Orleans, you need Frank Wilson on staff. It's why it was probably the most important hire Brian Kelly made when he was hired, and it continues to bear fruit over and over and over again. So that's one. Number 2, you beat Bama in Tennessee. Sometimes whenever we talk recruiting, if LSU misses on a guy, in particular a guy from Louisiana, what I'll often say is, you're not going to get everybody, and you can't tie someone up and throw them in the trunk of your car and bring them to campus and make them be there. You can make your pitch, and LSU always has a compelling pitch, and then you hope they pick you. But if they don't, you want them to go far away. The late Joe McKnight. Very disappointing when LSU didn't land Joe McKnight. But he went to USC and you never saw him again. When Devontae Smith from A-Meet picked Alabama, went there and won a Heisman and beat you, that stinks. When Cedric Van Pran from New Orleans went to Georgia and became a great offensive lineman there while LSU was struggling in 2021 and 22 on the offensive line, yeah, that stinks. You would have loved to have had Cedric Van Pran. Instead, you went and got Liam Shanahan from Harvard. There's a difference there. So you're going to miss on prospects, but you always want to go far away. In this case, the inverse was true. LSU went to the state of Tennessee and plucked a highly regarded talent out of Tennessee away from the Vols, and Bama was in as well, and LSU beat Bama for him. So the relational part of that, so big. And then I'll also tell you, when we look at how LSU is going to rebuild DBU, yes, a giant part of it is coaching. It's technique. It's being fundamentally sound. It's being assignment sound. And I think they're getting there because Corey Raymond's a great coach. But obviously you can close that gap more quickly when you have great players. One of the things that struck me in one of my practice reports this week was that looking at LSU's 2 deep, you have 3 true freshmen: Juwan Johnson, Deshaun Spears, PJ Woodland. That's 3 defensive backs, true freshmen in the 2 deep. One position, three defensive backs, true freshmen in the 2 deep. They are trusting the young guys that they recruited because they believe the guys they're recruiting now are better than the guys they had. And now you look at 2025, you've got DJ Pickett, the number 1 cornerback in the country. Now you've got a high 4-star here in CJ Jimcoily. You got Jace Thomas, another 4-star who's committed. And then you got 2 other big prospects out there, Bryce Fitzgerald from Florida, who's set to commit next week. And then the number 1 safety in the country, Jonah Williams, is set to commit August 24th, a week after that. So you could end up building a really impressive 2025 defensive back class on the backs of guys like DJ Pickett, CJ Jimcoily, which is only going to help you shrink that gap from what LSU was a year ago in the secondary to what we all hope they will soon be again. So CJ Jimcoily, 4-star, becomes the 20th commitment for LSU's 2025 class, the 2nd safety in the class, joining Jace Thomas, and maybe not the last safety in the class. So a big get there for LSU on Thursday. Tigers were off. Had the day off, but they got better on Thursday for the future with CJ Jimcoily picking the LSU Tigers. Okay, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day. Garrett Nussmeier was snubbed, y'all. There's no way around it. I want to talk about it next. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Y'all, I love sports. I'm so fired up. So fired up. that football is almost back. You know, I never want sports to stop sporting. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and that's the inevitability. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I got to do, open up the app, dream up bets anytime in the mood. Let's look at it right now, you and me. I'll pull open that FanDuel app, and we'll take a look right now. All summer long, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. New customers get, you bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Easy. Just go make a money line bet on something that's a no-brainer. How about a 30% profit boost on your same-game parlays? Right now, on live same-game parlays, a 50% profit boost on MLB games. You got to take advantage. You got to take advantage of those boosts and those bonuses every single day at FanDuel. So head over to FanDuel, start making the most out of your summer. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. FanDuel, great partner here on Locked On LSU. Man, as we continue here, I want to thank you again for making Locked On LSU your first listen. Of course, for your second listen, enjoy Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football, expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, I mentioned that Garrett Nussmeier was snubbed, and he was. I don't pay a ton of attention to the watch lists. And my contention largely with the watch lists is that there's so many players typically on watch lists that it's not really an honor to be on it. It's more of a concern if your guy isn't on it. Like when the Remington watch list comes out and there's 50 or 60 centers across college football on the Remington, like if you're not on the Remington, it's like, that's not great. The Davey O'Brien watch list was released on Thursday. And there were only 26 quarterbacks on it. And one of them was not Garrett Nussmeier. There were 6 from the SEC. Alphabetically, they were Carson Beck, Brady Cook, Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers, Graham Mertz, and Jalen Milroe. And you may roll your eyes and say, Graham Mertz, and you're not wrong. But if you look through the list of the 26 players on the Davey O'Brien watch list, all 26 of them have been accomplished starting quarterbacks in their career. Like Will Rogers, who's now at Washington, is on the list. Jacob Zeno at UAB is on the list. So, for example, a year ago, Zeno at UAB threw for 3,100 yards and 20 touchdowns. Like, you may not know the name, but for the sake of and in the name of inclusion, a guy like that's on the list. Jordan McLeod, another name most college football fans may not know. Well, Jordan McLeod started his career at South Florida, then transferred to Arizona. Then last year was at James Madison. And now he's at Texas State. Well, last year, James Madison, Jordan McLeod threw for 3,657 yards, nearly 3,700 yards and 35 touchdowns. Garrett Nussmeier doesn't have that accumulated in his entire career. So I understand it. Now, the flip side of it is, if you're an LSU fan, which I'm assuming you are, it's why you're here, is that while Nussmeier might not be on the Davey O'Brien watch list before the season, he does have the 8th best Heisman odds. He's tied there with Cam Ward and Riley Leonard. Cam Ward at Miami and Riley Leonard at Notre Dame. Both of whom, by the way, are on the Davey O'Brien watch list. So, yes, Garrett Nussmeier is and should be one of the 26 best quarterbacks in college football this year. He should be a guy that when the midseason Davey O'Brien watch list comes out, when hopefully LSU is 6-0 after they beat Ole Miss in Tiger Stadium, again, hopefully, then Nussmeier will be on the midseason watch list. And even more so, we all hope he's a finalist and wins it at the end of the season. That means he would have had a great year, and by extension, LSU would have had a great year. But I don't think there's any doubt that he is one of the best quarterbacks in college football, but he just hasn't started yet. And all the guys on this list had. So that's one of the things that might be working against Garrett Nussmeier just a bit. It has been impressive watching Garrett Nussmeier, though, so far throughout this fall camp out at LSU. As we've chronicled throughout some of those team periods, Nuss has really just taken command of this offense. He very clearly is the leader on this team. And it's something to go into a season like this where you're replacing a starter and you don't have the question of who is going to be your starter. I mean, just think about in years past. When Joe Burrow finished up in 2019, we all went into the 2020 season assuming Miles Brennan was going to be the guy. But you also had some very talented freshmen that came in behind him. Brennan got injured, and we know how that season went with Finley and Max Johnson playing behind him. TJ Finley, by the way, who's at Western Kentucky now, on the Davey O'Brien watch list. But then if you look at 2022, Brian Kelly's first season, or 2021 even, it was going to be Brennan's year coming off an injury. He got injured again before the season, and then we know how that played out, mostly Max Johnson. But you go into 2022, and a lot of people thought that would be Garrett Nussmeier's opportunity. Brennan was coming back for a final season. Actually, it was supposed to be Brennan coming back off a final season. Nussmeier was there. You'd brought in Walker Howard, and then they went and brought in Jaden Daniels out of the transfer portal. And there was a lot of sentimentality for Brennan because he had waited his turn, but it wasn't a given. My point is, you were in the times where you've replaced a quarterback, it's just been very seldom that you've started the offseason knowing who your starter was. Last year, you knew Jaden Daniels was your guy. And all that to say, there was actually some points of contention about that. If you remember, like in the bowl game, Garrett Nussmeier played in the bowl game two years ago. Not after the 2022 season. Garrett Nussmeier played in that bowl game. Remember, Garrett came in the SC championship game against Jordan after Jaden Daniels was injured. There was all this talk. They split reps in bowl practice. They split reps in spring. So even then, after Jaden had started in 2022, it wasn't a given going into 23, which seems silly now. But it's really the first time probably since 2020 when Brennan was replacing Joe Burrow that you go into the season undeniably, unequivocally certain of who the starting quarterback is going to be all year. And it's not Miles Brennan. It's Garrett Nussmeier. I think LSU is going to be great for it. Okay. Speaking of Nussmeier and the offense, Joe Sloan met with reporters after practice on Wednesday. We've talked about that a smidge here. One of the things Sloan talked about, though, was some of the changes that are coming to college football, including the helmet comm. So quarterbacks will now have an earpiece, and the offensive coordinator, the play caller, will be able to speak to the quarterback in his helmet. Joe Sloan talked about that. There's also iPads now allowed on the sideline. So with this new technology, what is that going to mean for LSU? Well, the offensive coordinator gave us a little insight. We'll get into that to wrap up Locked on LSU next. It is Locked on LSU, and we are brought to you by Game Time. Man, y'all know I love Major League Baseball. With some of my fondest memories as a kid, I remember one time my dad, my papa, my brother, and I left Baton Rouge, drove to Houston to watch the Astros and the Cubs in the old Astrodome. Yeah, I remember being a junior in high school. My dad, my brother, and I, along with one of my best friends, we drove up to Chicago to catch games at Wrigley for a weekend. Told you before, my 40th birthday, my wife and I were in New York, went to go see the Yankees. One of my greatest sports memories ever was being at the 2001 World Series in Old Yankee Stadium. It was post 9/11. All that to say, I love Major League Baseball. I love all the things about it. The crack of the bat, the smell of the grass, the pop of the mitt, the taste of the hot dog, the cold beer, if you're of age. And Game Time makes that happen. They got killer last-minute deals. They got all-in prices, views from your seat. They got a lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So if you're going to be getting to a ballpark here soon, make sure you punch up the Game Time app. They also have priority last-minute deals. You think about this. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, for concerts, comedy, theater, all of it. So make sure if you're going to walk into the game, punch up that Game Time app right before you go in. You never know what you might find. And that lowest price guarantee I told you about, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you buy a ticket and find a cheaper ticket in your section. You get all the details there on the Game Time app. But take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. As we come down the home stretch here, Joe Sloan, when he met with reporters after practice on Wednesday, discussed some of the technology that LSU's implementing. Remember, the NCAA now is allowing helmet comm and iPads on the sideline. And we had a chance to talk to LSU offensive coordinator Joe Sloan about both. First, the helmet comm, which is effectively what happens in the NFL, right? Where the coach on the headset, either in the press box or on the sideline, can tell the play to the quarterback. And that mic is live up until about, I think it's about 12 or 15 seconds before the snap. So even if a defense discloses, right, if a defense shows you what they're going to do at that point, the offensive coordinator can be in the quarterback's ear giving him tips about what he's seeing from the press box. So it could be a potentially huge advantage for offenses. And here was Joe Sloan on the helmet comm.
One with the helmet, right? With anything that you're using, you always have to have a plan. Then you have to have contingency plans, right? Just as anything in football, right? Hey, we got to have contingency plans for injuries. We got to have contingency plans for whatever might happen, whatever might come up. So now that the earpiece is something, we have to have a contingency plan for that not happen. So we'll do periods throughout camp where we say, hey, headsets down for 4 plays, right? And now the quarterback's back out there on an island. The positive thing about Garrett, right, being our quarterback, is he's played a lot of football and been here for a long time. So he's been in college, and he's been used to getting plays in that manner, right? So for him, it won't be a massive adjustment, but it's still, right? I mean, you get used to hearing in your ear, and it changes, right? And we have to be prepared for that, and we will, right? We will, but it's just another contingency plan we have to attack.
Garrett Nussmeier is a first-time starting quarterback, but he's been around college football now for 4 years. So getting plays signaled in from the sideline, if the helmet comm does go down, might be an issue for some teams, maybe less of an issue for LSU because of Garrett Nussmeier's experience. But I am most interested, y'all. I am most interested with the helmet comm, not so much on just calling it a play, but I think about when you have brilliant offensive minds that can stay in the quarterback's ear. Because think about it, up until the point, like what we've seen so commonly is check with me, right? So you break the huddle, the quarterback's at the line, they maybe fake a snap in the formation to see if the defense discloses what they're doing, and then they look to the sideline to see if there's any adjustment. Well, that changes now because you maybe don't have to fake the snap and stop. You can just have the coach speaking to the quarterback at the line of scrimmage up until the point where the helmet comm cuts off. So it's fascinating to see how that strategy is going to be implemented and who most effectively uses it. Now, the other part is iPads on the sideline. You see this in the NFL. Remember, for a long time, the NFL had still images, and you would see these sequential images where you could look at the photos in sequence because you couldn't use technology on the sideline. So they would take like this series of shots, almost like a flip book, and so you could see exactly what was developing, but it was on still photographs. Well, recently, in the last decade, the NFL went to allowing tablets on the sideline. Well, now college football is allowing the same. And Joe Sloan talked about why he likes this so much in college football.
The iPads on the sideline, I think, is awesome. I think what it does for us is, hey, we think we just saw something, and we don't have to go. We don't have to. Hey, Deli, was that guy a G or was he a shade? Right? He was a 3. What'd you see? We get to see it. So there's no. It eliminates some of that conversation of confirmation of what were the very minor nuances of what might have been going on, especially in the box, right? In the tackle box. So we'll use it a lot for that. to make sure we're correct there and make our corrections. But our corrections are going to be the same way that we were correcting and coaching on the sideline. Because game day is about our guys going to play, right? And we don't want to create anxiety, right, or the old paralysis by analysis type of situation on the sideline. That's go play, man. You've worked, you've prepared all week, go play. So we're going to use it for confirmation of, hey, what we're saying, but we're not going to, it's not going to be a meeting. We're not going to go, cut on the film room, right, and create that type of environment. We're going to absolutely create the game day environment and make sure that their physicality and their aggression and their attack mindset stays in place.
I think about the helmet comm. I think about the iPad and how much of an advantage that is for teams that already have an advantage being veteran. And it's one of the reasons why I am becoming more bullish on this LSU team the more they go through camp. I like very much Garrett Nussmeier. I like how much the defense is coming along from what I see with my own eyes. And the more I look at it and I realize how many veteran players, Garrett Nussmeier is a fourth-year player. Garrett Dellinger is a fourth-year player. Miles Frazier is a fifth-year player. You had two juniors on the offensive line, but they're Will Campbell and Emory Jones, who are both going to be first-round picks. Josh Williams is a sixth-year player. John Emery is a sixth-year player. Chris Hilton's a fourth-year player. Kyron Lacey's a fifth-year player. You look around this team, CJ Daniels is a fourth-year player. And that's just the offense. Then we go to defense, talk about Paez, who's a six-year player, and Jacobian Guillory, who's a fifth-year player, and guys like Parashan and Braden Swinson and Savion Jones, who are all fourth and fifth-year guys. I mean, look around the team. This is a veteran team that has played a ton of college football, and now you're adding to that these communicative advantages as well. I think it only benefits further a team like LSU with so much experience. Getting closer to kickoff with LSU and USC out in Las Vegas. Hey, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. And as always, thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen. Now, go check out Locked On College Football. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description of this podcast, so you don't even need to search for it. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, that'll do it for us here. Do us a favor on podcast. Smash that like button or subscribe if you would. Rate us, leave a review. And if you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a video. Until next time, it is Locked On LSU, your team every day.